what it is in your life right now that you are longing to do, what the next big thing is for you. But I do know this. It's one thing to know what we want, to say we're going to do this or that, but it's another thing entirely to follow through. So in this episode, I want to share a sort of life hack that I've been using really throughout my adult life for all of the biggest leaps I've taken. And it really works. And it's really simple. And I hope that today, by the end of the episode, if you've got something that you are really wanting to do, but maybe a little bit intimidated, or you've, been saying you want to do it for a long time, but you haven't actually taken the steps. This is one of those episodes where if you want to, kind of keep everything the same in your life and just not disrupt the status quo, you can leave now. But if you're ready to do some big things, make some big changes in your life, this is a good one. So welcome to episode 5 of Me in the Quest. Well, hey, what's going on? Really glad you're here. My name is Ben Crosswaite. This is my second time filming this segment of the show because I forgot to hit record on the audio a moment ago. So if I sound a little bit annoyed that I'm still talking and saying the same things I just said, it's because I am. This actually sets up perfectly what I'm going to talk about in the epilogue today, which is basically how to know when to hit publish on something and when to keep tweaking, when to keep editing it. And this is for anyone who does, creative work. But honestly, whatever it is, like if it's a business idea, right? Like how long do you sit around and tweak it before you try to go public with it? If it's a big career change, right? How long do you sit around and plan it and mull it over and do the pros and cons list? And then when do you know it's ready, kind of time to take action? So it's a huge topic, and really I'm just going to start today in that epilogue, which is the part of the show after the main conversation. Today I'm just going to kind of share some of my thought process and how I'm getting better at that. But part of the reason I wanted to talk about that today is this is actually the third time I filmed this episode. So I was a few weeks ahead, and now I'm only 1 week ahead because I keep messing things up. Because I pretty much just have one day a week for the most part where I film and, compile the episodes. I kind of edit it throughout the week, but one day to film. And so 2 weeks ago, I filmed the first version. That was a combination of I messed up some lighting, camera things, and the content I didn't say everything I wanted to say. And then last week, I added a new light, but I used it definitely in the wrong way, and it washed out my face. And so as I added my coloring and stuff that I do in post-production to give the show its look, I was basically like the same color as my white wall, and it was weird. It was weird stuff happening. I just didn't look good. My hair was also weird. I had like 2 zits, and it's just like that was enough to like put me over the edge. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this again. So, so I'm gonna talk about all that in the epilogue. So stick around if that sounds interesting to you. But if you're here to learn how to follow through, just like I talked about in the teaser, the main topic for this episode is how to follow through on the things we say we want to do, right? When I started to conceptualize this show, I knew that this is going to be something I wanted to talk about early on because it's, number one, it's been a huge sort of life hack for me that has, I really have used it very consciously in some of my biggest life decisions throughout adulthood. Then also just with the theme of the show, kind of this idea of looking at story and story structure and trying to sort of extract wisdom from that. This idea is something called an inciting incident. This is what we're going to talk about today, an inciting incident. And this is something that comes from the world of writers, screenwriters, novelists. It's the moment where the protagonist is sort of thrust into the main action of the story. It's a doorway of no return, sort of a line that's crossed that you can't come back from. And that's what we're going to essentially do to our lives. I'm going to show you today how to write something into your life that makes sure that you follow through. And I know that sounds, and even depending on where you're at right now, that might sound like, oh no, I don't want to do that. That sounds scary. Or maybe you're like, yes, finally, I need to know how to do that because I've been wanting to do something, but I just won't do it. So, if you are in that, let's do this thing mode, perfect. Stick around for the whole episode because I promise this is going to help. If you're in that other mode of oh no, don't make me do something I don't want to do. I understand that. I completely get that. But I would really encourage you to stick around at least through Act 1 because I'm going to talk about that exact thing, sort of this mindset approach we need to take. So really glad you're here. This is Me and the Quest, episode 5. Let's jump into Act 1. So what we're trying to do in this first segment of the show, right, is talk about what do we want and what's the problem. Today, we're actually going to talk about this phrase, what I want, because it's actually a bit of a misnomer, right? Because we all want multiple, competing, mutually exclusive things. So for example, like for me, I struggle with like my energy level, and I've been getting better. I've been changing some things, but I would love to not be up and down energy wise as much as I am, and sort of along with my energy often is like my confidence in what I'm working on. Just two big mood swings. But I also love carbs, coffee, these things that like contribute. I know I like staying up late when I'm in like a creative flow and then not sleeping enough. I love these things that I know contribute to my energy level swings and my sort of positive, negative outlooks on the world, these big swings. We all want, I should say most of us want this sort of like love story for the ages, that, you know, been married for 70 years and we just like die holding hands, and it's like, you know, at like 110 years old, and it's just like the sweet thing. We all want that. And then we also all want to like chase every attractive person we see, right? There's some parts of our brain that wants that too. This is fine. It's just human nature. But what I want to talk about is identifying these multiple selves within us. And I'm actually going to name them. So this sort of higher self that is more objective, that is not as subject to the mood swings, to what's happening in the moment, more removed, more visionary. I'm going to call that self the writer self. And this sort of lower self, if you will, it doesn't even mean it's bad. It's just sort of more basic, more almost animalistic, you could say, just in the moment. I'm going to call that the character self, right? Writer self, character self. So, you know, a moment ago, I talked about, you know, the two different ways this episode might be hitting you. You might be in that moment of, yeah, I've been wanting to do this thing. Like, I hope this tip helps. Like, give it to me. I'm ready to go. You might be in that mode. Or you might be kind of in the throes of like, don't make me do anything I don't want to do. Though I think if you're listening to this show, you're probably either just doing it to be nice and you're one of my friends. But no, I don't think that's true. Or you are, you know, if you're listening to this show, you're probably at least somewhat interested in these ideas of doing big things and making big changes. And, but even if that's true, we all have these moments, these days, these seasons of life where we just don't actually feel like doing that stuff because it requires too much of us and we're just not in the mood. You know what I mean? And that's fine too. It's not a bad thing. But what we want to do today is take an action from that place of writer self. Whether it's like just when we're in the right mood, when we're just, you know, been having a couple good days and we've got some momentum, and like whatever it is, we just drank a bunch of coffee, we're just, you know, got some sunshine today, whatever it is. When we find ourselves in that higher writer self, we're going to take an action in our lives that traps us, including that lower character self that's just sort of moment to moment, may or may not feel like it. Going to trap that person into doing the thing anyways. This has worked so well for me. So this is actually where I'm going to transition into Act 2, and I'm going to share a couple examples from my life, and then in Act 3, I'll give you a couple templates, and you can sort of choose, you know, pick your poison, if you will, but not poison. Pick your method. I don't know. So depending on how well you know me, how you found this podcast or YouTube show that you're currently watching or listening to, you may or may not know that I am a musician. That's sort of my main thing that I do. And, you know, again, depending on how long you've known me, you may or may not know that for a good period of time, I was a guitar player and sort of a band guy, but not a singer. And like so much so that even like in like a band rehearsal, if we were like working on like what's the melody exactly, and like someone asked me, I couldn't even bring myself like to people that I was really comfortable with to like hum it back to them. Like my voice would kind of crack. Even if I tried, it was like a barrier I couldn't overcome. And yeah, it was one of those things where it just became a thing. Like if I had started singing younger, I know it just would have, I would have just jumped into it, but it just sort of became a thing that like, oh, I don't sing. This is not something I do. And it got to the point where I knew that at any point, if I just like stood up and started singing, people would be like, oh, either, oh, he's good, or, oh, that's why he doesn't sing. But either way, it just became a thing in my life, and sort of that sort of calcified, and like I just couldn't bring myself to do it in front of people. At home, at this point I'm living at home still, and so like anytime I was home by myself, or once I got my driver's license, things like that, I was singing anytime I could when I was alone, even recording myself so that I could practice and get better. And actually, some of those early recordings still exist somewhere. I should probably make sure those get deleted before someone stumbles onto that computer and finds some really embarrassing footage of me. But it just became a thing in my life. It became like a sort of glass ceiling, I guess, that I needed to break. And so I finally got to this place where I was like, okay, I gotta sing in front of someone, because I feel like once I start doing it, it'll just get it out that first time out of the way, and then I'll be fine. So I set a date, and I set up a concert, and I invited family and I think I don't know, 4 or 5, maybe 6 friends, and kind of all at once. Again, when I was just feeling it, when I was feeling in a slightly more confident place, either confident or just like to that, that feeling when you're just like, I'm not really confident, but like I just have to do it. Like I just can't not do this anymore. Just sort of fed up. That works too. So I was in that place, and I sent a group of texts to friends and family, said, hey, this date, if enough of you are available, I'm going to do a miniature concert, like 6 songs, and we can all hang out after. I need to do this. I need to sing. And right away I got back all these awesome, really kind messages with a bunch of exclamation points, right? Like, about time, so excited, like I'll be there. And of course, like as soon as I hit send, and whatever it was, the week or two between sending that invite and actually having that little miniature concert, of course I had like lots of moments of like, oh no, what have I done? Do I like fake an illness or something to get out of this? But the great thing about something like this is, even if I had faked an illness, these friends, these people that, cared about me and believed in me, would have still followed up. Like, hey, I know you got sick, in quotes, but when are you going to do that concert? Like, let's hear it. I know they would have held me accountable. So I had really no other option at that point to follow through. Another example from my life is when Aaron and I moved back to Maine, where we now live, from Durham, North Carolina. And we had that sort of moment in time, like I talked about last week. I really should have told this story then, probably. But this idea that we had a moment in time, we went out on a date. We went to Whole Foods because we were pretty broke at that time. And they kept running these like crazy deals, like once a week, where it was like $2 draft beers. And we were probably like bought like a bag of peanuts or something. I don't remember. Like we weren't going out to any fancy meals at that point. So we were at Whole Foods, and that implied that we're going to go out to fancy meals now. It doesn't happen very often either. So this was actually one of the first times we'd had a babysitter since Forrest was born. I think he was like maybe a couple months old at this point. And we'd been talking about this idea of moving back to Maine. But that was the night that we sort of made it official. And especially for me, like she's a little bit easier, just like arriving at a conclusion and cool, let's do it. But for me to have something like that to look back on and say like, that's the night we decided, sort of no take backs, like we're doing this thing. That was really big. So we had that moment, but that wasn't the inciting incident. That was just us deciding what we wanted. For me, like as I look back on it, the moment sort of no return was FaceTiming my family and telling them that we were going to move back. To then, maybe if like 2 weeks later, we're like, oh, some other opportunity came up, we're actually not going to move back. Like to say, hey, we're not going to be 1,000 miles away. Like your newborn grandkid's going to be close. We're excited to come move back and be around family and to like get them all excited about that, and be like, oh no, like the shiny new thing popped up. We're actually going to do this instead. That would have been like so awful. I wouldn't have wanted to do that to them or to ourselves. And Aaron and I had gone through a process. We had taken our time with this decision. We decided it was the right thing for us. But I think if we hadn't, like, there are actually a couple, I don't even say doors that opened, but doors that appeared to be open that I didn't even really pursue because, that opened or appeared to be open in that window from when we told my family to when we actually left. Because it's that whole thing of like, if all you're ever doing is sort of just in the moment, like, ooh, that idea looks interesting, or like, let's maybe try this, or ooh, is this a thing? If that's all you're ever doing, and like, yes, be open to new things that pop up, but if that's all you're ever doing, you're not going to accomplish much because it's such all that jumping around and lack of focus, which is something I've definitely dealt with in this podcast is, these things that are helping me remedy that tendency. But if that's all you're ever doing is sort of in the moment, shiny new object, does that, maybe I'll go down this path and then I'll zigzag over here. Probably not going to get to where you want to go. So by telling my family, that was our inciting incident. That was our doorway of no return, where we, made it more embarrassing, more awkward, made it harder to not do it than to just follow through. And that actually transitions us into Act 3. I got a few different templates, I think 3, that I landed on. So let's talk about these 3 different types of inciting incidents that you can write for your story to make sure that you take the action and follow through and, do the thing you're meant to do. All right. So the first type of inciting incident is creating something where there is a fear of embarrassment or awkwardness if you don't follow through. So this is sort of my go-to. This is what I've done the most. That's, what I was doing when I told all my friends and family about the concert, right? It's just, if I didn't follow through on that, it's a bunch of awkward conversations. It's, talking to them again, multiple conversations about, like, oh, I'm actually not going to do the thing because like just trying to back out and it's awkward. With all my creative projects, I post about them online in a way to like build some excitement. And then that way, if I don't actually do anything, I know some people in my life will follow up, will ask what happened to that thing I was going to do. Or even just for me, like imagining people kind of looking at me and thinking like, oh, Ben said he was going to do that thing again. And like those other ideas he had, it just kind of fizzled out. Like, I don't think, people are that mean, but even just the fear of that is enough to kind of make sure I follow through. So if you can bring some people into your life, people that, respect you and you respect them. Also people, like, it helps if you know that these are people that are going to say something, that are going to ask you, that are going to make sure, kind of keep you accountable. That's going to be one of the best, maybe that as humans, we're scared of a lot of things, but that sort of shame factor, the embarrassment, that's one of the most powerful things. So if we can kind of harness that and use that fear of being shamed and embarrassed, use that sort of to help us essentially, to make sure we actually do that thing. So yeah, just think about if there's someone in your life or a group of people, or maybe, posting online about it is a good start. I would say, like, if it's something you really want to do and it's a big thing, simply, putting one post on your social media feed, that's probably not going to be enough because people post all the time like, hey, I'm going to do this thing now. And it's like, 4 likes. And it's like, okay, yay for you, Phil. And then Phil, we're all like, Phil's not really going to do that thing. Like, so that's fine as a part of it. But maybe, I think those real intentional conversations with people who are close to you, bring them into it and make sure that they're going to hold you accountable. Second type of inciting incident is creating a fear of a lost investment. So typically it's going to be money or time, right? Or also, if you want to get a little more abstract, you could also, like, emotional energy is something, that's an investment too. But nothing works better than just like cold hard cash, right? So I do hesitate to like bring money into it because it's not a automatic solution. And I'm not just saying like if you just go buy something, then it's gonna like guarantee you follow through, because we all have like things we've bought, right? Because we're gonna like start a new hobby or learn a new skill, and then that thing, like, we unbox it and get excited and then never do anything with it. We've all experienced that. So actually a decent example that just came to me because I'm looking right at it is the camera I use for these videos. It's not super high end, but it's known as like one of the better sort of intermediate level for YouTube. And so, I bought it refurbished, so it was even less money. And I bought it with money I had from selling some music gear that I didn't use. So it wasn't even coming out of like, money that we would typically use to buy groceries. It was just, I sold some gear and bought something different. But that was an investment, and it was an investment too because I gave up something I already had. So like I sold, that guitar equipment for this, so I should, make sure I actually use it. And to bring that sort of embarrassment, awkward, shame thing into it, I had told a couple people I was going to start doing video. Aaron seeing me around the house with a camera, like if I never do anything with it, it's embarrassing because again, I've bought another piece of equipment I'm not going to use. So it's embarrassing, and it's a wasted investment because I sold that thing I could have used and only to buy a camera that I'm never going to take video with, right? So, and then actually this also plays well into this idea of investing time and energy. It's sort of like a more gradual inciting incident because you can't spend a bunch of time all at once. It doesn't work that way. But gradually, as I spent more and more time learning about the basics of video and learning a new editing software and all this stuff, again, to just sort of back out and be like, nah, I'm not going to do it. There's a lot of wasted time. So whatever it is you want to do, if you can craft some sort of fear around a lost investment, that's a good way to kind of make sure you follow through. So fear of embarrassment, public shaming, awkward conversations, fear of a lost investment of time, energy, money. The third and final one for today, and there's probably more variations of this we can think of, but this should be plenty to get you going. But the third and final one is to just make it a logistical nightmare to undo whatever action it is you're going to take. Chances are whatever it is that you want to do is going to have some amount of this logistical sort of behind the scenes element to it. And a lot of times if you can just take a little step or two here or there, it gets harder and harder to undo that as you go, right? And a lot of times as you start to take those actions, you're also starting to build up that investment, and you're also going to start to build up that fear of embarrassment if you sort of back out. So, maybe this is even like a subset of the other two. It really comes back to, for me, that fear of a lost investment and fear of embarrassment. But if you can start to just take some of those steps, and it just gets harder and harder logistically. Like the whole idea with this inciting incident is that it's just harder in any given moment to turn around and give up than it is to just keep going. That's all you need to do. It doesn't need to be anything more than that. So, once you've once you've jumped through a hoop or two and it gets really hard to then like jump backwards through the hoop, that might be enough to just trap you into following through. And it's sort of like, well, I've gone through this process, so I might as well see this thing through, right? So I think those first two are the most powerful, but if you just want to get sort of nitty gritty, sometimes you can just take an action or two. That's just really hard to undo. And so, that's worth thinking about. So when we look at inciting incidents and stories, as I started to think about this, I was noticing that there's this sort of pattern in a lot of the ones that came to mind anyways, where there's like you could call it like a soft inciting incident. Like it kind of starts, and then there's like a hard inciting incident, like a line is crossed, like black and white. So like one example is Star Wars, right? So Luke Skywalker seeing the message from Princess Leia. That's like a soft inciting incident. There's sort of this like, like what's going to happen moment. But technically at that moment, he hadn't really fully been thrown into the story yet, because he could have had his interest kind of piqued, like what's going on here. And then it just sort of, something happens with R2-D2's battery runs out or whatever. I don't know how he works. I'm not super up on Star Wars, but his battery runs out and he's like, oh, that was weird. And then he just goes on living his life on his farm that he's on. Whatever. Isn't it like a moisture farm or something? I don't know. I'm going to get comments from Star Wars people. But, so that's sort of the like soft inciting incident. But then a little bit later, when he comes back and finds his family is like been fried to a crisp. They look like a French fry that like fell off the tray and like landed at the bottom of the oven and just like shriveled up. And when he comes back and sees his family looking like that, now it's like a moment of no return. Now it's his story is forever changed and no going back to how it was. I'm not suggesting that you I don't know if I can like get like thrown in jail for this if like this gets traced back to me. So just to be clear, like don't burn your family to a crisp, but as if that needed to be said. But whatever it is for you, what I want to kind of break down is that soft inciting incident and then that hard, like black and white moment. So consider this moment that you are listening to this show. Consider this your soft inciting incident where you're getting a little nudge in the direction and you can still back out at this point. It's just a podcast. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm not gonna chase you down and see if you did the thing or not, right? Like I'm just sitting in my shed talking to myself right now. But if this is finding you and it's kind of resonating, you sort of created that ... like what's going to happen next moment. That's your soft inciting incident. And what I'm going to encourage you to do is this week, right now would be even better, but set a date within the next couple weeks. And by that date, I want you to take some sort of inciting incident action. So, just to be clear, like what we're talking about, I'm just saying set a date and so like using my example of the sending texts to people, inviting them to a concert I was going to do. Set a date that by that date, you will send the text. You will sign up for the thing. You will have a coffee with your friend and tell them this big idea that you've been holding inside and say, hey, hold me accountable. So that's all you got to do. That's all you got to do. It's all you got to do. Just like radically change your life. No big deal. No, it's not. It shouldn't be that scary. So my hope here is that I've sort of put it into stages, right? I want you to set a deadline in the next couple weeks and say, by this date, I will have done this thing, taken this action, which is then going to sort of force me to follow through on this bigger goal. And the bigger goal might take years, right? Like I've been talking about how I'm sort of working on a 3-year plan and I'm not quite through year 1 yet. Momentum plays such a big part in these big things we want to do. And so what an inciting incident is really making sure happens is that momentum gets generated, because we will just stay home in our comfort zones like we talked about in episode 3 forever if the inciting incident doesn't get us to take action. Chances are, if you are listening to the show, you are interested in pursuing some sort of big thing. You're interested in, how do I leave my comfort zone and start to do things that I really want to do, but have scared me up to this point. You have some things that you want to do. You have some things that you want to change in your life. So this idea of an inciting incident has, like, literally, I don't use the word literally, and I don't use the phrase life-changing. I don't use either of those lightly, but it has been literally life-changing. And I'm not trying to be like hyperbolic, like it literally has changed my life, in the sense that when I look back at all of my biggest leaps, my biggest life changes, sort of like just a page turn, and it's like, whoa, like a big thing has just happened. When I look at all these big changes in my life, this idea of the inciting incident has been right there in all of those. And so I want that for you. I want you to be able to make some of those big positive changes. And if this little bit of information, if this podcast can be not just inspiring, but also give you like some real, hopefully practical and clear takeaways, some actions you can take to make sure that, that story that's meant to be, that you're meant to live happens, gosh, it will be worth having filmed this episode 3 times for that. As always, I would love to hear from you. Kind of the home for the show. What I think of as home base for the show is Instagram at @MeInTheQuest. I'd love to hear from you there. Comment on things I post. Direct message me if you have extra thoughts, or if you'd like some help kind of deciphering things you're working on with anything I've said, in these first 5 episodes. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to continue this conversation, not just in these weekly episodes, but as direct with you one-on-one as we can get. So Instagram's the best place. You can also leave comments on YouTube, but Instagram is going to be the quickest, most direct way to me. So let's go into the epilogue, casual conversation at the end of the show. Today's topic, I want to talk about my process that has definitely been a process. It's been something I've had to work on. But when I think about my music, when I think about these episodes, How do I know when something's sort of as good as it can be and is ready to be sent out into the world? And when do I know it's time to redo it, to continually, to continue tweaking it or whatever? I think I have some thoughts that can be helpful, not just for creative people who, make like art and shows or talk in public or whatever, but like if it's a business, if it's whatever your sort of big idea is, I think this can be helpful to know when is it time to go and when is it time to kind of wait and continue to tweak and edit. Because I think it's an important skill, one that I'm still very much developing, but I have made progress. So anyways, that's going to be the epilogue. We'll see you there on the YouTube. Be popping up on the screen, on the podcast. Just sit back, relax. Let's go to the epilogue.